doing? Good? Tov?
Your term in Nakuda.
Nice.
More than the Nakuda.
We're coming to the, we're making our way through.
Yes.
Pretty remarkable. And we have the Chavraya Kadisha here.
Yeah.
It's amazing. The guys who decided to want to come to this, they've been consistent, basically. And as I mentioned before, I've been listening to these shiurim from Rabbi Tzvi Ari Rosenfeld on the praises of Rabbi Nachman. And the more I listen to him, the more I am convinced that there is something unique, entirely unique about Rabbi Nachman, about Rabbi Nassim, about Breslov. And the more conviction I have that there is geula within this avoda. They say that when Mashiach comes, it's not going to be a chiddush for Breslov and Chassidim. They're going to be already familiar with the avoda of Mashiach. I want to share with you a point that I heard today, actually, from one of my Rebbe of Gurzi, who I've mentioned before. He started this chabura on like parnasa and wealth and really important stuff. So I listened to the first one. He was talking about the inyan of chabura, and he referenced the Zohar, which I don't know exactly where in the Zohar, but he actually was his colleague, Tzvi Broker, who was also doing the chabur with him. So they quoted the Zohar. And basically the idea of the Zohar was that the love and camaraderie and friendship among the Chavraya Kadisha is what actually enables a revelation of Sisrei Torah. That there's a relationship, the secrets of Torah. There's a relationship between friendship and camaraderie and brotherhood and tapping into deep Torah. And I think that's a part of the energy we want to cultivate over here. Especially, obviously we're a little bit past Lag BaOmer. But the tikkun of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was that, the students of Rabbi Kiva, they were big Talmidei Chachamim, but they lacked a certain love for each other, if you will. But the Chavraya Kadisha of Rabbi Shimon they loved each other. They had camaraderie, friendship. They bonded. They were sichas chaverim. They were talking. And it's a lost art in a certain sense. And Zot Hashem, that we should be zochet to have that camaraderie amongst ourselves and to allow the Torah to flow forth from us and to see how we can connect over here to the Torah of Reb Nosson Zal and Rabbeinu Zal. Rabbi Nachman, there was big inyan of him, sichas chaverim, of friends coming together, being together, loving each other. B'ezrat Hashem. So we're holding here in Parshas Chodesh, and we're going to talk about the moon. We spoke about this last week a little bit, but just to go a little bit more slow, or to go a little bit more slowly, so we don't miss anything here. So the Chazal say that the sun and moon were created equal, but in size and intensity of their light, both in size and intensity of their light. But the moon complained, saying, Rabbona Sha'olam, is it possible for two kings to wear one crown? So Kadosh Baruch Hu responded, go diminish yourself. Later, to appease the moon, he surrounded it with the stars, like the king's steward and a host of assistants. This is based on Chulin 60b and Bereshis Rabbah, chapter 6, section 4, or pasuk 4. Here we go. And we're seeing, by the way, this idea of a Zamra and finding the good through all the different themes that are emerging in this Torah. So now we're going to see how it was expressed vis-a-vis Parshas Chodesh. And after that, on the fourth Shabbos, right, and we went through the different parshios prior to this, the Arba parshios, and the last one being Parshas HaChodesh. So we read Parshas HaChodesh that Bechinas Kiddush HaChodesh Bechinas Mili Halavana Mip Gimasa. This passage relates to Kiddush HaChodesh, the sanctification of the new moon, which conceptually relates to the role of the good point in restoring the moon from its blemish or diminishment. And so what we see, there's a footnote here, but basically what it explains is that the moon is really the concept of Malchus, and it's the concept of Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people. It's the concept of the Shechina, and the waxing and waning of the moon is representative of this dance of Galus and Geula. That when the moon is waning and there's not so much light, it's as if the moon's in a state of exile, so to speak, that the Shechina is in exile, that we're in exile, and the greater the light of the moon corresponds to the Indian of Geula, expanded consciousness, we're connected. This is that oscillating reality of the moon that exists as well for the Jewish people. I remember just thinking about this right now. It came to mind that when I was in Poland, and I was on a trip that was looking at the different concentration camps, but I was struck by we were one of the locations. I don't remember where we were, but it was like very cloudy, but it was like a full moon. And despite the amount of clouds, the moon was very, very bright, and it was able to shine through. And I'm sure I think that they connected that, like they were talking about that the Jewish people are connected to the moon. And so, of course, in the place of the deepest darkness, that moon was shining powerfully. And we'll talk about that here as well. Kizeh Yedua ki Shekish Yisrael hem chas v'shan b'midrega b'chusa ze b'chinas b'gam b'lavana kitru kal yireach. The explanation is as follows: for this is known that when the Jewish people are on a low spiritual level, chas v'shalom, right? Like we said, it's akin to this moon state of blemish, on the kind of the primordial moon's complaint. Shemisham boyim kol habakamim since the moon's blemish is the origin of all spiritual blemish and sin, God forbid. Therefore, when a Jew on a low spiritual level awakens and finds a good point inside himself, and through this he returns to Hashem and repents, this is synonymous with the restoration of the moon from its blemish, the concept of Kiddush Chodesh. It's going to change, Bezrat Hashem, it's going to change our relationship to Kiddush Levada. As something that we're like, oh, it's Kiddush Levada. To like, oh, it's Kiddush Levada. It's representative of the essential avoda of a Yid. And it's going to change. We're going to realize more deeply that this is the first mitzvah that was given to the Jewish people. And we're going to see how laced into that, it's not just we're sanctifying the moon, but we're also this Indian of within the darkness finding the good. That's what Hashem is saying on a level of panemius. That it's a Yid's obligation, it's your first mitzvah to find the good. So now this is because the essence of Kiddush HaChodesh is achieved through this concept of looking for and finding the good point concealed by the darkness. For at the very beginning of the month, when we look for the moon to sanctify it in Basin, the moon is then extremely small and thin. Thus, it is then merely the aspect of a point in the nighttime sky.
A little bit more.
Namely, the aspect of a good point. We want it a little bit dark. Yeah. As alluded to, I am black but pleasing. Haynu keshalavana he betachas and yud besof hachodesh. In other words, when the moon is in at its absolute smallest at the end of each month, azay tzrichim. Then we azay tzrichim kol Yisrael the chabsha levaksha ad shemotzi ade re'ia ezer nekuda tova melavana. When it's at the smallest point at the end of each month, all Jews must then seek and search for it until eyewitnesses find some speck of the light of the moon. They can testify to it. And by virtue of this small point, they then sanctify the new month in Beis Din. And sanctifying even just a tiny bit of the moon's light elevates it. This being the aspect of the rectification and restoration of the moon. And through our rejoicing over just a mere speck of the light, the aspect of the good point that we merit to find, despite its being infinitesimally small and concealed in darkness, we ourselves are thereby rectified and genuinely enter the scale of merit. Conceptually, this is the rectification and restoration of the moon from its blemish. And this is exactly the point that we brought out in the first year. When a person's in a dark place, it's counterintuitive to then say, let me find the good. You just go deeper into the darkness. Like it's almost like a point we can miss. It's like I'm looking, I'm like, gosh, I'm just like, I feel myself far from Hashem. I feel myself not living up to my potential. I feel whatever, and this exists at the highest level of whoever. This exists at the level of tzaddik, at his level. This exists for a person that's at a very low level. And the Rebbeinu Zal's imperative for us is to, at that moment, that's when you start looking for the good. And you might find a morsel, something very small. That's enough to be Mekadesh. That's enough to be Mekadesh. And that's an introduction to a new concept here. It's the idea of Kedusha. It's just, this is the reality of a Bracha here.
It's the shafach of the...
Yeah.
All the
good points.
Yeah.
All the good points.
All the noise.
I was thinking that even the lashon of Bebeit Din struck me too. Like Bebeit
Yeah.
Din, doing all this in the house of Din.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Oi. Weiter. Valkenomim Beisin, V'Kol Yisrael, the Kudash Mekudash. And thus, after receiving the witness's testimony, that the head of the judge of the basin and all the people present there say, sanctified, sanctified. Ki aydei nekuda lavad, this kadshim b'chol kanal aydei shedanim l'chavschos. Yes, exactly. Because what's the din? They're judging on the side of favor. They're being down l'chavschos. That's exactly the point. This is because even by means of just a single point, we are sanctified as a result of our judging favorably. A week ago when I posted about themes for this year, this is when I was talking about this shlav of Parshas Chodesh, having a good marriage, geula. This is the ikir yesod of really any relationship. Any relationship, we have such a tendency to be pointing out where a person's messing up. You're not showing up in these areas. Rabbi Nachman is saying meforish, Rabbi Nassim is saying meforish, and these were. We're talking about Rabbeinu Zal. We're talking about Tzaddik Yesod Olam. We're talking about Rabbi Nassim Zal. We're talking about a complete. Rabbi Nachman said he was a complete Tzaddik. What they're saying to us is, you want to bring people back. You want to have good relationships. Find the good. What about all the bad? All the things you don't like? Nevertheless, that morsel of good, that's what he wants you to focus in on. You can see how this is like revolutionary, especially from the time frame that it was coming from. Like, okay, great, positive psychology is coming out and saying the same thing. You know, and you have this small Ukrainian city in Europe with a Rebbe screaming this. It's like wild if you think about it. And that's Kodesh, by the way. That's Kodesh. When you're able to mevakesh the good, and that's what's in your mind's eye, and that's what you're seeing, then we enter the world of Kedusha. And what's Kedusha? Al Pi Rabbi Gershenfeld from Rabbi Nachman Yaakov, passionate connection. So this actually changes the way we maybe think about Kedusha. Passionate connection to the good. It's the good that allows, that facilitates the passionate connection. I'm not passionately connected if if there's bad, right? I'm not seeing the good. I'm passionately connected when in my eyes I see good. And on the other end, I'm separating from the things that aren't good. I'm not focusing on that. I'm separating from that. I'm focusing on that which is good. And this is also the idea that they all say, they're saying, Mekudash, Mekudash. You have to speak it out. The in other words, through their words, by elevating the good points to the dimension of perfected speech, they elevate the moon from a state of blemish and diminishment to a state of tikkun and wholeness, which is its sanctification. Or lavad shera'u me'alavana. All of this was brought about by a point of light that they sighted from the emerging moon. And this is the idea of the moon's waxing and completion, is itself the concept of good points, affecting it too, can mentioned above. The speech part is so key. His speaking. Right? The mouth corresponds to the, as I believe, brought from the Arizal, that the mouth corresponds to Malchus. Our whole avoda as Yidden is to mitaken Malchus, which is the interesting thing about Malchus. Is that that's our experience, that's where we are, that's Olam Asiyah. Malchus is representative of Hashem's kingship, but we are the essential piece there, because we look at our world and it's seemingly devoid of the light of godliness, and through our speech and through our mind, etc., saying, Hashem, you're here, and I'm engaging with you vis-a-vis my speech, vis-a-vis my hisbodedus.
Were we speaking at your table in Shavuos about the ladder and Jacob was looking at himself on top?
I don't think so. That might have been a different Suda.
Okay. So, it's the gematria of Sulam, I think, is Kisa Kavod. Or like maybe if you add one of the words around it.
Yeah.
So it just made me think that he was looking at himself at the top, but the top is also Kisa Kavod. So
Yeah, about that intelligence.
you were just saying that we're the Iker part of Hashem's Malchus.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
slow.
It's a proof.
When you learn these things, you realize like how so many of us are just like totally like we're not aware of this dynamic that's happening. That we're just like, learning and, my Siddharam, which are important and essential. But imagine how much more powerful your entire avoda is when you realize what you're doing in the avoda. Which is like, I am bringing the Shekhinah out of exile, vis-a-vis my tefillah. when you get up in the morning. You daven a netz, you daven a shachris, b'tzibur.
By looking at another yid properly.
By looking at another yid properly. That is the tikkun in the world of Malchus, or in the sphere of Malchus. All the mitzvahs and all the things that we do, which are like, there's a holistic process that's happening here that is cosmic in its implication when we realize how important. I remember, I don't know if I mentioned last week, I was speaking to my cousin with Kalmas. He's encouraging me to do a certain type of an avoda, but it demands a lot. And it's very tiring. It can be tiring. So he said a very interesting thing to me. He says, when you actually believe that what you're doing is important, then you're not as tired as much. You're only exhausted and fatigued, meaning there's, I guess, a basic level of tiredness, but tzaddikim, like Gurzi, I don't know how much sleep he gets, he doesn't get a lot of sleep. And he's like expressive and happy and joyous and present. I don't understand. He's not getting so much sleep. You think he'd be like dragging his feet or something, like chas v'chalila. No, because this idea.
So it's not just his bodedus, it's like a schedule.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like it's everything that it's the entire avoda.
Yeah.
It's like the morning routine. A person gets up. They let's say in a perfect world, they get up.
It's also the night routine. Their morning
Exactly.
routine starts at like
Exactly.
4 a.m.
Exactly. So
sometimes earlier.
chatzos for some of these for real hardcore brass lovers. It's chatzos. It starts with the chatzos, then it goes into like mikvah, and then
Maybe they take a nap, maybe like early morning, for
Right.
like an hour or two. For like,
and then they're nates, and then learning, and then busy, and but they believe powerfully that everything that they're doing is important. So when you believe that everything you're doing is important, you're like, what are you talking about? I am moving worlds.
but you have also a job. So how do you do that?
Yeah, it's
It's not for working people. It's for people in yeshiva. I mean, I can't say that, but when I asked when my Rav in Israel was telling advice to his Hasidim
Yeah.
to do this schedule, I asked one of his students, like, I can't do that. I'm like, I have a job. He's like, it's not for
Right,
you. It's
right.
for the people in yeshiva.
right. So even like if there's one aspect of the avodah that a person can machazik, like, oh, it's hard to do his borders,
Right.
Also, also, I think in American society, we just work too much. Like,
Yeah.
The 40-hour work week is an outdated concept from like back in the days of the factories and
you're
blue collar. So now it gets very hard to have to raise a family and work 40 hours a week and exercise and do a spodaduce and pray 3 times a day and eat healthy and get enough sleep.
it's a lot.
You used to be able to raise a family with one blue collar job and for the whole American dream.
You could
Yeah.
buy a house on minimum wage after World War II.
And this is what the Ramachal says, by the way, in the beginning of Mesil Sharm, that basically you're going to be too burdened, too fatigued. Do you think about your life? And
that's a
therefore,
good thing?
no, it's a bad thing.
Oh.
No, he's going to say you're going to be habituated like horses, just like running down the runway.
The rat race.
The rat race, yeah. And so that's why, again, that's what I realized why this avodah is so key. But I'm talking particularly about his bodin news, because
Give me 1 second, I'm looking it up as we speak.
because this bodin news is what gives you the opportunity to get out of the rat race, to go into a private place, and to think about your life, and to bring your kishtas to Hashem.
Yeah.
And say, you're working on a particular avodah. You're working on Shmir Sanayim, or you're working on Tikkun Bris, or you're working on Lashon Hara, or a person, encounters a mania there. And they come to the host avodah and say, Hashem, what do you want from me? I'm doing the best that I can. Yeah. Give me strength to do this. I want to. Imagine that. You're in this candid, real moment where you put your heart on the table. And say, Hashem, I'm begging you to help me. You didn't put me in the base medrash. So my miniyas are different than the guy, my buddy in Israel who's learning in one of the chaburs over there. He doesn't have the same challenges I do. So I need you to help me. You know how real that is, and Rabbi Kalmus brings this up. He's like, and it's not the same if you put it in your Shema Kolenu for 5 minutes. It's just not the same. It's good, you should do that, but it's a different inyan when a person goes into that space and they scream it out, they talk it out, they yell it out. They cry it out, they laugh it out, whatever. That's I think our hope for any semblance of a real relationship with Hashem. Is that candid sincerity, that realness, where we're able to take ourselves out of the grind. We say, Hashem, help me Mekadesh my monotonous life. The day to day, the stuff, this, the that. This is one of the ways to be metaken the Malchus. That we're filling in the moon by bringing it all to Hashem. We're filling in the moon vis-a-vis our speaking it out, bringing the Spodulus, bringing all the Likutey. And you're supposed to start the Spodulus, by the way, with your Likutey, because that's what's going to help you be in a state of simcha, a state of expansivity.
I keep going back to the shir where we spoke about in the temple, the avodah in the temple, where like the Kohanim represented God's. They're basically giving God's voice, God's will, and then from the other end there's Yisrael taking the lowest part and saying it's the exact same thing. They were saying it backwards.
Yeah.
Like God told them what to say, and they said it from the other direction. He just put it right back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's something there.
There's something there.
Because it's all...
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
What we have to do, if we were to become like perfect Jews, what we have to do is exactly what God spoke.
Yeah. I heard my little Biderman say this week. He's saying, if you there's this yid who doctors told me he only had 2 months to live. He wasn't a friendly guy. wasn't a nice guy. But once he found that out, he started being the nicest guy, paying all his debts. Stopped. Worked out all his arguments with his people around him. And he's just the best yid, the best friend, the best father. Like, what would you do? Just don't focus on the long term. Just think about today. Think about this week. Don't get worried about my whole voter for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Well, I dispatched on the go. Wherever I am. That's why people are like, why do you put phones on you?
So in summary, the theme of tonight was Parshas Chodesh, and how the moon is representative of the Jewish people's journey from exile to Galus, from Galus to exile, right? The filling out of the moon, the waning and waxing of the moon, etc., and how this is thematically connected to within the darkness, finding the good, and that good being the light itself. Hashem will continue on our journey together next time.